the members, I see they have no follow-up questions, so that gives me the opportunity to pose my questions. First off, I would like to commend the Nature Foundation, so you and your staff, for the extensive work done over the years and currently as well with the limited resources that you guys have. After listening to your presentation, I must add to what has already been stated. Has been the things that the Nature Foundation is, the challenges that the Nature Foundation has are quite alarming, to say the least. And you know, one word that came to mind was abuse, right? A lot of times when we think of abuse, we think of other things, but the way the Nature Foundation, I would say, has been treated, not by any particular department or whatever, but just in general, of what is expected of the Nature Foundation compared to what is given to the Nature Foundation, it would fall under that category of abuse, if you ask me my humble opinion. Because after hearing everything that Nature Foundation does, one would assume that Nature Foundation would be one of the best funded NGOs on the island. Why? Seeing all the responsibilities that it spans cross various ministries, such as VSA, you know, dealing with the sewage water, for example, VROMI, we already know all the things that fall under VROMI, tourism as well, because if you're tasked with preserving the coral reefs, of which the tourists come to see, you know, that is also something that is done for another ministry, right? And then also education, when you look at the education outreach and such. And to hear that there's a SLA being done, I'm glad to hear that, but to me there should be SLAs being done with all of the aforementioned ministries. So my question to you would be, is that something that has been tried in the past? Is that something that you're currently dealing with? What are the challenges when it comes to getting that cooperation from the various ministries as it pertains to funding? Because if you're helping something that has to do with a particular ministry, I would only assume if they're to benefit from it, that they also contribute towards it. So what are the plans, or has been the plans and the challenges as it pertains to SLAs with various ministries? As well, in the beginning of the presentation, you touched on coral bleaching, also the various reasons why, what the causes of bleaching, being acidity, pollution, etc., and all of the extensive work and funds that would go into if we would have to spend money on restoring the reefs. But before we look at restoring, I know as well that one of the reasons of coral bleaching is also climate change. So climate change is not something as a small 36 square mile island that we can address on our own and basically have much say in. But if we were to say, okay, we're going to find the funds and dedicate the funds to restore these coral reefs, and climate change is one of the reasons of the bleaching, aren't we then mopping with the faucet open? So your thoughts on that would be much appreciated. The nature fee, a wonderful idea. I'm all for it. I think that's something that, as a parliament and also going over to the government, is something that should be looked into. But as well, in saying that, if we look around in our to other islands who does that as well, if you look at Bonaire, Bonaire has a $35 nature fee, but they have their nature fee is contributed to towards the use of their nature park. St. Martin does not have a nature park, at least not yet, right? So automatically the thought would go towards introducing the nature fee into a tourist levy. But in doing that as well, as a parliament, we also need to stand still by the fact of the tourist levy, something already being thought on, but also various departments want a piece of, right? So if we think on education, sport, youth, theater as well, there are various ministries that already has, you could say, a verbal request in for part of this tourist levy whenever it were to come. So if we're gonna incorporate various NGOs and our departments of government that will be benefiting from this tourist levy, then we have to be very cautious with the number that we're requesting, and it has to be realistic. So to say we're going to put in a tourist levy of $20 and it's going to be spread amongst 5, 6 different departments, ministries, and NGOs, that's not realistic as well. But also bear in mind of all the other challenges that are too high of a tourist levy, because if you're going from 0 and we go up to 35, that comes with its own challenges as well. Little Key, I took note of the challenges that Ms. Ponteflet mentioned. It's also something that falls under the scope of the motion that I brought in last October as it pertains to protecting the ponds and national nature areas on the island. Seeing the challenges that you guys are currently facing as it pertains to making it a conservation area, or I don't remember the exact term anymore, but our preparatory resolutions. Would it be expedited if, for the time being, we were to place Little Key on the monument list and place it as a national monument? While we're dealing, you guys are dealing with the challenges, because I think placing it on the monument list and declaring it a national monument would have a bit less paperwork and challenges, but then it would still have some type of protections while the preparatory resolutions or the conservation documents are being drafted. I look at Ms. Ponteflet in a bit for her thoughts on that. Also, I took note of some ideas brought by my colleagues as it pertains to enforcement, especially as when it comes to sewage and bath ball mandates, etc. And I would like to bear caution on that thought, because it's on surface level, it's a brilliant idea. But before we add to things that are already there, we need to deal with the yellow tape that we already have. And currently we have, in the current mandates, 3 ministries that already have the mandate to deal with such. And because they already have 3 ministries, they have so much yellow tape that's already there that nothing is being done, right? And if we were to add to that, then you would have a 4th mandate being given, and I don't think that expedites the process at all. So I think, especially as a parliament, and speaking with the relevant ministers, that elimination of the yellow tape would be more advantageous to the problem that we're having than just merely adding to it, because on surface level it seems good, it sounds good, but in reality it would not bear much fruit, in my humble estimation. Question, oh yeah, in the beginning you spoke on mangroves. It's a hot topic. And if I was to be devil's advocate and pose the following question, a great percentage of the society right now are of the opinion that the mangroves that we have are not native to St. Martin. So I would like if Ms. Hickerson can elaborate on that that information that is being spread of mangroves not being native and such as well. Now we have basically all the ponds basically surrounded by mangroves, and before you would have an oversight from one side of the pond to the next side of the pond, so that takes away some of the view, and some members of the public prefer the view over the mangroves. So I would like Ms. Hickerson to give the pros and the cons of if those mangroves, by example, were to be removed tomorrow, what would be the pros and what would be the cons of that? And to explain that mangroves not being native, if that is true or not, and we can clear the air where that is concerned. And lastly, as well, the salt pond and conservation of the salt pond. I see you are very, you have a lot of ideas where that is concerned. I like them as well, but I would like to propose another idea in designating the salt pond as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. What's the possibilities where that is concerned? What are those possibilities? And as last, a lot of members summed up the news and the information given and the challenges that the Nature Foundation are confronted with as depressing, under attack, doom and gloom, urgent, sad, and just now I categorize it as abuse. So I'm glad to hear that the priority, or seemingly the attention for the things that needs to be prioritized is finally there, or basically is there, or that's been voiced on and spoken on today. And basically I look at my colleagues, I look forward to working together with you guys to solve that. And also the amendments that are coming this year, that seeing that the priority is very high on the priority list, that this is also part of the amendments coming this year. And with that, I would like to hand, oh yeah, last thing. We're looking at the tourist levy, and I'm looking at my colleagues with that, the tourist levy solely as something for tourists, but what about taxi drivers? Because they make use of the flora, fauna, and the nature for the tours, etc. And I know in St. Lucia, taxi drivers do pay a levy. I know in Egypt, taxi drivers do pay a levy. It's not high in comparison to the tourist levy, but I would look forward to the thoughts of my colleagues in subsequent meetings on that. And that would be it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, MP York. Regarding the plans and challenges with SLAs with other ministries, so far, officially, I have only submitted a request for an SLA with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport. And that is because we had such an overwhelming amount of research and support. Back in 2022, we did an education project where we did a gap analysis, and we had a lot of listening sessions with educators, students, administrators, and through that program, we came up with what their greatest needs were regarding nature and science education in St. Martin. And when we evaluated that and proposed a service level agreement, I then subsequently went to all of the schools and presented the proposed SLA and made it clear that if we were going to ask for this, that would mean that money from the ministry would be allocated to the Nature Foundation, potentially instead of their own organizations. And after we did those presentations, I said was open for feedback, or if they supported it, they could send a letter of support from their school board. And we received letters of support from 5 of the school boards in St. Martin to move forward with that SLA. So that is the one that we have officially proposed. But there's several different challenges, one of which is the capacity within these policy departments to manage our service level agreement. Because we have had such a enduring and positive relationship with the policy department at the Ministry of Romy, regarding the proposed SLA with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport, the Ministry of Romy actually offered to manage the deliverables and the reporting aligned with that service level agreement as well. So one of the challenges is the capacity, but I believe the primary challenge is, of course, the funding. And when we are presenting this, how budget cuts happen and when the amendments are going on. Our work with the Ministry of TIOT has mostly been from the bottom up rather than the top down. And we have a lot of good relationships within the policy departments and the permitting departments and maritime affairs. And that has been working very well. And it is our intention to propose to formalize that through a service level agreement. And in particular, with the ministry's focus on food security and tourism, there are a lot of gaps that we could fill as an organization there, and I hope it is well received. For climate change mitigation during restoration, of course, one of the things that I mentioned when we were talking about particularly coral restoration, people want to push us into taking, $30,000 and doing coral restoration. That is really not the case if you're going to do coral restoration properly. If you have the proper funding to do a long-term project like what is currently happening in Statia through NEPP funding, you can do coral restoration and have them be less susceptible to thermal stress and more adaptable to our current situation of our region, but you have to do the program properly. It cannot just be something that we allocate $30,000 to and we look at it twice a month. That's not going to be a successful program. So that is something to keep in mind. But one of the themes of the region, and particularly through our network of the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance, is nature-based solutions. So we look at the problems that we're having due to climate change and how we can solve them with nature-based solutions. And restoration activities are one of those. Lastly, or next, I understand the concerns regarding the tourist fee or the tourist levy and it being spread. There's a lot of areas of need in St. Martin, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed. I definitely just keep bringing it up to make sure that we are part of the group that when that is moving forward, that we're kept in mind. Because there have been previous talks of this years ago that I remember coming to a committee meeting, and it had not yet even been discussed to put part of that towards nature or conservation activities. So yeah, the needs from, in particular for our communities and our schools, is very glaringly there as well. And that's something that we acknowledge as well. The next question was regarding Little Key and the putting it on the monument list as an interim solution. So I will pass over to Ms. Pentaflint.
Thank you for the question. I just briefly went to look up the criteria for designating an area or structure as a monument. At first glance, I'm not sure it would qualify, but I will have to do a bit more research into that. But I do appreciate the out-of-the-box thinking and the suggestion. But it's difficult to give an answer to that right now, but at first glance, it does not appear to be possible. Thank you.
The next topic was regarding BAVPOL. I'm interested, actually, if it's possible to learn more about what the issues are surrounding the ministries that are dealing with that already. That's not something that has come up in any of the conversations I've had about that. So if I'm able to get some more information, maybe we can deviate that goal a little bit to make it more effective. And then regarding mangroves, yes, there is a wide and pervasive misconception that because there were no mangroves around some of the ponds in like the 60s and 70s, that means that they aren't native. But this is not true. There were mangroves on St. Martin. There's mangroves on the French side. They are in Anguilla. They're in islands in the region. They are native to this area. But through things like colonialism, hurricanes, failed developments, that's why the original mangroves were removed. They were restored again around the ponds, and that is where the issue surrounding the viewpoint of the pond comes from. Definitely when the Great Salt Pond was used for producing salt, they were removed, but that was part of colonialism and enterprise. That also should not have happened. So when they were restored, they have now provided so many ecosystem services that removing them entirely should not be an option. Firstly, they're hugely important to our migratory and local bird species. If you go, for example, to the new birding platform that the Nature Foundation put at Great Salt Pond, you can see that almost all of the mangroves in the area have birds sitting in them. They also provide a really quiet and conducive environment for those birds to hunt and live on these ponds. So that is one of the roles that they play. But also because they play such a role for flood protection and climate change mitigation, there are services not only provided just to the bird species. if you think about when the floods happened in November and how much trash ended up being alongside the roads in Phillipsburg, that was a direct result of the mangroves being flooded and all of the trash that they keep out of the pond due to their root system being pushed back onto the road because the water level was higher. And that is keeping the pollution out of the pond is an important role that they play. Also, it stops flood surges because of the root system. But I think one of the things that a lot of people don't know and understand is that mangroves, just like seagrasses, they absorb carbon from the environment. Carbon in the environment is what is pushing climate change mitigation or climate change to be worse and worse. So the more carbon in the environment, the more storms we have, the stronger they are, the more frequent they happen. So when a mangrove is absorbing carbon from the air, it is reducing the climate change for our community. If you then cut down or dig up the roots of a mangrove, it can release all of the carbon that was stored. So you're not only losing the mitigation that it was offering us, but you're actually releasing more carbon into the environment. Because we know that Great Salt Pond is an important cultural and heritage area for St. Martin, we do understand that it's worth having viewpoints and spots that people could stop and appreciate it. But having it all be open so that you can appreciate it while you drive by is not really an even trade-off there. Having more areas like the birding platform that a lot of taxis currently use, that I think the Tri-Sport Bicycle Tours stop at, a lot of people stop there now, which we're really happy to see. Having more areas like that is a good way to appreciate the native environment, but keep the climate change solutions in place. We don't have to go completely the opposite direction. We can have a middle ground there. And the Nature Foundation actually is in direct talks with the Taxi Association now for initiatives in the summer at the end of high season to see what we can make work for both groups. But in general, yes, mangroves are native to St. Martin. They play a very important role. In the low-hanging fruit legislation that I mentioned earlier, I said that mangroves should be protected. You should note that I specifically mentioned red and black mangrove species. Those are not the species that are currently found around Great Salt Pond. So concerns about we shouldn't protect those species because then we'd never be able to trim these back if we needed to, that's not relevant for that area. And then lastly, I do think that looking into getting a UNESCO World Heritage site for Great Salt Pond would be really valuable, though I think it would be interesting to know where we're at regarding solid waste management and the plans for the landfill, so that when applying for that site, we know that there's no chance of expanding the landfill further into the pond. If that is an opportunity, then I do not think we would qualify for one. I don't think that that is the solution that we should offer, but I'm not sure where the plans are regarding solid waste management as a stakeholder. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hickerson. Just to chime in on the last thing you mentioned about the solid waste and as in relation to the pond. As it relates to the pond, in the motion that was passed in October with the protections of the pond, once the ponds are protected, then you won't be allowed to expand further into the pond. So I think they are all intertwined with one another. With that being said, I think the most important question moving forward is what to expect from us as Parliament. What I would like to propose to my colleagues would be the following. Prior to sitting with the minister, that we first have a closed-door in-house work group session about all what we learned and brainstorm on questions and solutions proposed to the minister, send those in writing, and then invite the minister to come to Parliament. And based on that meeting, relay the message back to the Nature Foundation with action points, because in your presentation you also had questions for the minister for the government's, I would say the government's stance on certain things, and I think that would also be part of the relay of information back to your person and foundation. So I look to my colleagues, I see everybody shaking their heads, those are still paying attention, and I think that will be the course of action moving forward. With that being said, I would like to thank Ms. Hickerson, Ms. Pantoflet for the masterclass given today on the topic and presented. And with that, I look at my colleagues, nobody have any questions, and I would like to hereby close this meeting of Committee of FROMI. So thank you.